This is a Mountain News Special Report. "2010, the year in review." From our studios in Hazard, here's Steve Hensley.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Mountain News 2010, the year in review. The weather made headlines throughout the year, from several snowstorms to an October tornado, but nothing compared to the destruction we saw after deadly flash flooding in Pike County in July. WYMT's Angela Sparkman has our top story of the year.
In the evening hours of July 17th, several inches of rain fell in minutes, turning Harless Creek and Coon Creek into rushing rivers, sweeping away cars and homes. People scrambled to escape.
They just picked it up like a boat and put it in their neighbor's yard. And the rain just kept coming. The babies were screaming, "Please God, don't let me die."
Crews from several counties rescued hundreds of people from the swift rising water. 2 people did not survive. Dana Walters died when the water swept her away from her driveway. 34-year-old Craig Morris died falling off a bridge trying to get to his mother in Coon Creek.
Craig was my hero. He was my wonderful son. A son that Mom could be proud of.
When the water receded, homes and businesses were torn apart, some even a football field away from where they once stood. Many state and local officials call the damage the worst they had ever seen.
But it's a real mess, and it's heartrending to see the damage. And
hundreds lost all they owned.
I can't say it, sorry, and cry about it, because what's he gonna do? What's he gonna bring back? You know, the tears not gonna bring my own back.
I don't know how to explain it, and I've just cried and cried until I can't cry no more. And I know it's material things, but at least I still have my life and my family.
Roads and water lines were also destroyed. President Obama declared a federal disaster. Governor Steve Beshear promised to send every available state resource to the area. People across the state tried to help those who lost everything. Shelters were set up. People donated food, water, clothes, and cleaning supplies. In some cases, volunteers had to use ATVs to deliver items to victims.
It's heartbreaking, I can't help but get emotional because, anybody goes over there that don't. It's tough.
People in other states also stepped up to help. Tractor-trailer trucks filled with needed items poured in for weeks.
We'd like to thank all the people for helping us,
They have helped us out more than they would ever know.
More than 2,500 people applied for FEMA aid. So far, FEMA has approved more than $15 million for flood victims. People say the area may never get back to how it was before the flood. In Pike County, Angela Sparkman, WYMT 57 Mountain News.
Severe storms raced across the state in late October, even producing a tornado in Bell County. Meteorologists say an EF1 tornado touched down in parts of Middlesboro, causing damage to several buildings. The 19th Street area was hit the hardest. Nobody was hurt, and even though there was lots of damage in a small area, it was nothing like the deadly tornado that hit downtown Middlesboro in 1988. Several snowstorms caused headaches for many in January and February, and again in December. Road crews were kept busy, and snow days were common for most school systems. It was one of the snowiest years we've seen in quite some time. From a mass shooting in Breathitt County to the death of a longtime mayor, here's a look back at some of the other big stories in southern and eastern Kentucky in 2010.
One of the worst shootings in recent memory happened in September at a mobile home park in Breathitt County. Police say Stanley Neese opened fire after an argument with his wife, killing her and 4 others before turning the gun on himself. 6 people dead in all. Michael Abner was sentenced to life in prison in Pulaski County after admitting to killing his neighbor in January and confessing to 2 other murders in the 1980s. A double murder in November in Perry County remains unsolved. Well-known businessman Roy Campbell and his wife were found shot to death in their home. A man was arrested for allegedly trying to kill Perry County District Judge Leanne Stevens while she was eating lunch. Police say Ronnie Brock started stabbing Stevens when another man, Victor Gaynor, came to her rescue and threw Brock out a window. We were there when Stevens was reunited with the man she calls her hero a week later at the Black Gold Festival. Whitley County Sheriff Lawrence Hodge found himself on the wrong side of the law. The sheriff is facing a 21-count indictment. The charges range from abuse of public trust to tampering with evidence. 8 Clay County residents were convicted in a vote-buying conspiracy. They included a former circuit judge, superintendent, county clerk, and magistrate. It was a huge political year as countywide offices were up for grabs, and Kentucky voters elected a new U.S. Senator to replace the retiring Jim Bunning. In the primary, Jack Conway narrowly defeated Hazard native and Lieutenant Governor Daniel Monjardo on the Democratic side. Republican and Tea Party favorite Rand Paul easily beat Secretary of State Trey Grayson to set up a November showdown between Paul and Conway. Paul came out on top after a race that turned negative and bitter.
We've come to take our government back!
Congressman Hal Rogers, who was first elected in 1980, won another term and became the new chair of the powerful House Appropriations Committee. People in Harlan also decided to allow restaurant-only alcohol sales. There were allegations of vote fraud in several counties, and after Manchester Mayor Carmen Lewis lost her bid for re-election, she fired several city employees the next day. When our reporter tried to ask her some questions, he was locked out of City Hall.
You're not going to confirm how many people were let go, why they were... Right, you never told me how many. You wouldn't tell me.
I didn't have to tell you how many people. But I told you what you heard was a lie.
What is the reason, though?
I don't have to give you a reason.
As an elected official, you don't?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
The employees got their jobs back after they filed a lawsuit. At least 3 incumbents seeking another term died before the election. Floyd County Magistrate Jackie Owens, Knox County Jailer Larry Hammonds, and Hazard Mayor Bill Gorman were all replaced by their wives. Gorman was first elected mayor of Hazard in 1977. His funeral was carried live on television and radio as some of the state's biggest political names paid tribute to him.
With tears in his eyes and barely able to utter more words, the last thing he said in that hospital room was, "Take care of my city."
You know something? I've never had a day that I regretted being mayor of Hazard. And the reason for it is I'm doing what I enjoy doing.
We also lost radio pioneer Ernest Sparkman and popular broadcaster Randy Jones.
93.1 WDHR, that's going to do it for today.
Former Paintsville Hall of Fame baseball coach Charlie Atkins also died, as did 11-year-old Kyle Smith, whose brave battle against leukemia inspired an entire community. Former Leslie County Judge Executive and Sheriff George Wooten died just hours after an interview on WYMT at the age of 94.
I'd like to be remembered as the #1 farmer in the state of Kentucky.
Why is that?
I love to farm. Farming is my life, and farming does everything.
Cusco!
The fight for and against mountaintop removal moved to Washington, D.C., as large groups of people on both sides held rallies. And on October 19th, WYMT celebrated 25 years of service to the mountains, and we look forward to being your mountain television for the next 25.
Here are some other headlines across Kentucky in 2010. In March, 11 people died on Interstate 65 when a tractor trailer slammed into a van carrying a Mennonite family. Karen Cipher was convicted in August of demanding millions of dollars from Louisville basketball coach Rick Pitino to keep quiet about a sexual encounter at a restaurant. By mid-December, more than 100 soldiers based in Fort Campbell had died in Afghanistan. And in January, a jury acquitted former Transportation Secretary Bill Nybert and road contractor Leonard Lawson of bribery and other charges, ending a federal probe into allegations of corruption. Up next, we'll take a look back at some of the biggest headlines across the country, including the worst coal mining disaster in 40 years. Terror threats, the Tea Party, and a mine disaster all captivated viewers in 2010, but it was an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that impacted thousands for much longer than anyone expected. CBS's Randall Pinkston looks back at the top domestic stories of the year.
The largest oil spill in U.S. history slicked the Gulf Coast.
It's a nightmare.
After a deadly explosion on a BP rig, it took 3 months to cap the leak and billions to clean up the damage.
Help us get our country back on track.
Sarah Palin spurred on the Tea Party.
Yes, we will!
Helping to bring a wave of conservatives into office in the midterm elections. Times Square was terrorized when police discovered an SUV packed with explosives. Faisal Shahzad pleaded guilty in the attempted bombing. Terror threats led to tougher security measures at airports. Travelers complained about body scans and pat-downs.
Just too personal, too invasive.
In Lower Manhattan, tensions ran high over plans to build a Muslim community center just blocks from Ground Zero.
Shame on you!
And Arizona drew protests for passing the toughest immigration crackdown in the nation.
Everyone needs a safe environment.
The suicide of a Rutgers University student forced new attention on cyberbullying and homophobia. Tyler Clemente killed himself after his roommate secretly streamed video of Clemente with a man in his dorm room. A spy swap grabbed headlines in June. The FBI blew the cover off 10 suspects and traded them for 4 Russian prisoners. In California, a gas explosion sent a fireball through the streets of San Bruno, killing 8 people. And West Virginia mourned the worst mining disaster in decades.
We did not receive the miracle that we prayed for.
An underground blast killed 29 mine workers in April. A lucky survivor of a Chilean mine collapse got a hero's welcome in New York. Edison Pena showed off his best Elvis impersonation
Return the sender.
And ran the New York City Marathon. And a fed-up JetBlue flight attendant pleaded guilty to criminal mischief after cursing over the intercom to a plane full of passengers.
He said, "Been a great 28 years, I'm out of here."
Steven Slater grabbed a couple of beers, then slid down the plane's emergency chute. Supporters called him a working-class hero.
Thank you all so much. It's been amazing.
Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
Other major stories included a massive overhaul of the nation's healthcare system, a repeal of the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and an extension of the Bush-era tax cuts. In the world of business, stocks recovered in 2010, and so did the auto industry, but the unemployment rate is still very high. The catastrophic forces of nature struck again in 2010, but so did the goodness of human nature. CBS's Charlie D'Agata has a look back at the biggest international events of the year.
A huge earthquake hit Haiti in January, killing 250,000 people. Another quake rocked Chile the next month, killing hundreds more. A giant volcano erupted in Iceland, sending towering clouds of volcanic ash over Europe. The ash clouds grounded planes and stranded hundreds of thousands of passengers for days. Pope Benedict apologized for sexual abuse at the hands of priests. He finally acknowledged the scandal, telling victims, "You've suffered grievously." Israel offered no apology for a deadly raid on an aid ship headed to Gaza that left 9 activists dead. Mideast peace talks remained on the verge of collapse over disputed Israeli settlements. The summer brought record monsoon rains that flooded Pakistan. U.S. troops delivered food and supplies to some of the 20 million victims. Across the border in Afghanistan, fighting intensified between U.S. forces and the Taliban. President Obama boosted American troop levels there to about 100,000. Some were pulled from Iraq, where 50,000 U.S. troops remain. Europe faced new terror threats. Intelligence agents warned teams of gunmen were planning to strike tourist spots and transit systems. A month later, anti-terror teams intercepted 2 printer cartridge bombs on cargo planes headed from Yemen to the U.S. The world held its breath for 69 days until rescuers in Chile dug deep to save the lives of 33 miners trapped half a mile underground. And Kate Middleton stopped holding her breath when Prince William finally popped the question. The British are buzzing about the royal wedding next spring. Charlie Daggett of CBS News, London.
News from the medical world also led to some of the year's biggest headlines, including an illness that threatened the globe. CBS's Sandra Hughes takes a look back.
2010 started with the world battling a pandemic.
The H1N1 virus is still circulating and is still causing disease, hospitalizations, and deaths.
But a new vaccine became widely available in January, and by spring, H1N1 cases started to fade. That's when another health crisis started making headlines.
I was sicker than I've ever been.
More than 1,800 people got sick after eating eggs contaminated with salmonella.
Just sick. Sick.
The outbreak led to a massive recall of more than 500 million eggs.
Concussions on the playing field made news all year. Studies show the number of kids with sports-related concussions had doubled since 1997.
Quarterback at Penn State.
The NFL changed its rules after several players suffered concussions, including Cleveland's Josh Cribbs. The league now requires players with head injuries to undergo more rigorous medical testing before they're allowed back on the field. And a new study found professional athletes who suffer multiple concussions are at risk of developing symptoms that mirror ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. The research calls into question whether Lou Gehrig actually had the disease named after him. Guidelines changed for CPR in 2010. The American Heart Association announced the life-saving technique is more effective without mouth-to-mouth in most cases. Turns out the average person is getting enough vitamin D, even though doctors warned for years that most Americans were deficient. And a tiny bug caused nightmares across the country.
One bed bug can grow to 30,000 in 6 months' time if it's not controlled.
Bed bugs invaded, biting people not only in the bedroom. The tiny insects shut down major retailers and offices, and bed bug summits were held across the nation, offering new ways to kill the bloodsuckers. Experts predict the little critters will stick around in 2011. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
We'll be right back. It was another year full of celebrity scandals, from Lindsay Lohan to Charlie Sheen. Some of Hollywood's biggest names kept the tabloid headline writers very busy. CBS's Kendis Gibson has more from Hollywood.
Some of Hollywood's brightest stars are anxious to put 2010 behind them. Sandra Bullock's big win at the Oscars for Best Actress was overshadowed within days when she learned her husband, Jesse James, was having an affair. She divorced him and took sole custody of a baby boy they were secretly adopting.
I once said, greed is good.
As Michael Douglas was getting ready to promote the sequel to Wall Street, he learned he had advanced throat cancer.
I've got cancer, found out about it three weeks ago.
Douglas underwent months of chemotherapy and radiation. He'll learn if the treatment was a success in January.
Lindsay scared at all about going to jail today?
And Lindsay Lohan got sidetracked from her big comeback.
I've been taking it seriously.
Serving 2 jail stints for violating her probation from a drunk driving conviction. And Mel Gibson's career went totally off track after he was caught on tape making racist remarks while ranting at his ex-girlfriend over the phone. An ugly custody battle continues to play out.
Can I get you something to drink?
Charlie Sheen may be a ratings king, but he lived up to his bad boy reputation. He spent time in rehab in the spring to settle charges of domestic violence against his third wife. Then he filed for divorce. And the New York City police are still investigating a dust-up at the Plaza Hotel in November. Police say a porn star locked herself in the bathroom while Sheen wrecked the room. She claims he was drinking and using cocaine. His second wife and kids were also staying at the hotel. Courtney Cox and David Arquette split up after 11 years of marriage. Eva Longoria and Tony Parker also called it quits. California girl Katy Perry captured British comedian Russell Brand's heart. They got married. But an outrageous Lady Gaga and wholesome Taylor Swift captured the top music awards. After losing The Tonight Show on NBC, Conan O'Brien landed on TBS. At 88, Betty White was back in demand. She even hosted Saturday Night Live. And a very young crowd boosted Toy Story to the #1 movie of the year. The animated film grossed more than $400 million in the U.S. alone.
Candace Gibson, CBS News.
Thanks so much for joining us for this look back at 2010, a year in which WYMT celebrated its 25th anniversary. During the last few months, we've invited news, weather, and sports anchors from the past to be a part of our broadcast one more time. We'll leave you tonight with some of those highlights. Goodbye, everyone.
I love the sun coming up over the hill. Makes me feel good knowing I'm home.
WYMT is celebrating a major milestone today, its 25th anniversary.
Of course, you know, I started working here when I was 12 years old.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Hensley.
And I'm Jill Hammond.
And I'm Amber Philpott.
And I'm Susanna Sizemore.
And I'm Darwin Singleton.
And I'm Danielle Smoot.
And I'm Chas Gayhart.
And I'm Heather Haley. And I'm Angela Bevan. And I'm Deanne Stevens. And I'm Sherry Sparks.
And I'm Michael Goen.
And I'm Cassie Seyfried.
Hello, Eastern Kentucky.
How old am I? You were an intern when I started here. So
I came here September of 1986.
Good evening, everyone, and look who's back in town for the moment.
Good evening. Glad to be in this seat one more time with you.
So, Jay, what have you been doing the last few years?
Not much. Will you look at that haircut? I paid $350 for that.
It's been a pleasure to be back here, an honor to be back here.
I am El Nino, scourge of the sea.
Yeah, Jim, you've got a lot to live up to.
You know, it's tough. I've got to tell you after seeing that.
It is great to be back after all these years, friends. Let's take a 3-day sneaky peek.
Well, we're going to leave you tonight with some parting words from Hazard Mayor Bill Gorman. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
The thing I like to do is quote my mother, who died when she was 94. She says, I love these mountains, and I love these people. And I think that is the theme song of my life, and I agree with her.